Let me tell you the murder story of the Ellie Gould. Ellie Gould never got to graduate, never got to fall in love again, never got to grow old. All of that was stolen in her own kitchen. Oh, the love. It's a story that will break your heart. It's a story about love, about trust, about a beautiful 17-year-old girl with the whole world at her feet, and about the boy who took it all away. This story takes place in a quiet little town in England called Caen, in Wiltshire. The kind of place where nothing bad is supposed to happen. The kind of place where parents let their kids walk home alone and don't think twice. But something terrible happened here. Something so awful, so senseless, that it still haunts everyone who hears the name. Her name was Ellie Gould. And this is her story. Ellie Gould came into this world on February 6, 2002. Her parents, Matthew and Carol, held her in their arms and dreamed about all the wonderful things she would become. They had no idea. They couldn't possibly know. She grew up in Caen, in a warm home filled with love. She was the kind of daughter every parent hopes for. By 17, Ellie was in her final year of sixth form at Hardenwish School in Chippenham. She was studying for her A-levels, working so hard, staying up late with textbooks and highlighters because she wanted a future. She wanted to make something of herself. And she had dreams. Big, beautiful dreams. She wanted to study psychology at university. She wanted to understand people, to help them. And she wanted to join the mounted police. Can you see her? A young woman on horseback, serving her community, protecting others. That was Ellie's dream. She loved horses more than almost anything. She was on her school's equestrian team. She competed in local events, her face bright with joy as she rode. She also loved cross-country running, racing through fields and forests, feeling the wind in her hair. Everyone who knew her says the same thing. She lit up a room. She had this way of making you feel seen, feel special. She was the girl with the smile that could chase away clouds. And like so many 17-year-old girls, she fell in love. In January 2019, Ellie started dating a boy named Thomas Griffiths. She had known him since they were both 11, back in year 7. Same school, same classes, same friends. First he seemed fine. He was good-looking. Smart. Came from a nice family in Derry Hill, a nearby village. On paper he was the perfect boyfriend. But Ellie's father noticed something. He later said he wasn't overly keen on Thomas. The boy was too quiet, too reserved. He didn't say much. You never really knew what was going on inside his head. Ellie's mother thought he was just shy. Just a typical awkward teenager. Nothing to worry about. For 3 months they dated. They did what teenagers do. They hung out. They studied together. They texted late into the night. But something started to feel wrong. Ellie began telling her friends that Thomas was too much. Too intense. He wanted to be with her all the time. He didn't like it when she wanted space. He made her feel suffocated. And with her exams getting closer, Ellie needed space. She needed to focus. She needed to breathe. So she made a decision. A hard decision, but the right one. She ended the relationship. It was early May 2019. Just days before everything went dark. She had no idea. No idea what he was capable of. On the night of May 2, 2019, Ellie went to bed like always. Maybe she read a little. Maybe she scrolled through her phone. Maybe she thought about the future, about exams, about all the wonderful things waiting for her. She had no idea it was her last night on Earth. Earlier that day, she had told friends that Thomas wasn't taking the breakup well. He was upset. He didn't want it to end. But Ellie was firm. She was done. She needed to move on. She fell asleep in her safe, warm bed, in her family home, in the town where she'd lived her whole life. She never woke up. The morning everything changed. May 3, 2019 started like any other day. Thomas Griffiths was dropped off at school by his mother. But he never went to class. Instead he sent an email to his teachers. Said he felt unwell. Then he walked to the bus station in Chippenham. He caught a bus back to Derry Hill. Back to his house. But here's where it gets chilling. His mother was still home. So Thomas did something that should terrify anyone who hears this story. He hid in his bedroom wardrobe. He waited in the dark among his clothes until his mother left. He planned. He calculated. And when the house was empty, he came out. He took the keys to the family car, a silver Ford Focus. And before he walked out the door, he went to the kitchen. We don't know exactly what happened in that house. Only Thomas knows, and he's not telling the full truth. But this is what the evidence shows. He arrived at Ellie's house. There was an argument. Ellie stood her ground. She wasn't taking him back. She wasn't changing her mind. And Thomas couldn't handle it. He put his hands around her neck. He squeezed and squeezed until she stopped fighting, until she stopped breathing. And then he used the knife. 13 times. He stabbed her 13 times in the neck. 15. In her own kitchen. The place where her family ate breakfast. The place where she made tea for her friends. The place where she should have been safest. She was 17. She was just 17. What Thomas did next is almost impossible to understand. He didn't run. He didn't cry. He didn't call for help. He cleaned. For an hour he cleaned the crime scene. He used clothes to wipe up Ellie's blood and stuffed them in a plastic bag. He washed his trainers in the kitchen sink. He cleaned the knife with an apron. And then he did something so cold, so calculated, it makes your blood run cold. He placed the knife in Ellie's dead hand. He wanted it to look like she had done this to herself. Like she had taken her own life. Like her death was her own fault. Then he took her finger. Her dead finger. And he used it to unlock her phone. He texted one of her friends, the friend who was supposed to give Ellie a lift to school. He pretended to be Ellie. He said not to come. Then he drove home. He changed his clothes and threw them in the washing machine. He took the bag of bloody evidence and dumped it in some woods nearby. A neighbor saw him and gave him a ride back to school. From there, his mother picked him up like nothing had happened. Later that day he texted friends. Did normal. Said he and Ellie were going on a break and see how things go after exams. He even texted Ellie's phone. Asked if they could meet. He knew she was dead. He knew he had killed her. And still he played the game. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, Ellie's father came home. We can't imagine what he saw. No parent should ever have to see what he saw. His daughter. His beautiful girl. Lying on the kitchen floor. Police came. They started investigating. They checked cameras. They tracked phones. They talked to neighbors. And one neighbor mentioned seeing someone matching Thomas's description near Ellie's house that morning. At 6 o'clock that evening, police arrested Thomas Griffiths outside a friend's house in Caen. He denied everything at first. Said he hadn't seen Ellie that day. Said he was going to her house to study. Said he had no idea what happened. But the evidence told a different story. Police saw marks on his neck. He said they were from self-harm. But experts said no. Those were defense wounds. The kind you get when someone fights for their life. When someone claws at you while you're choking them. Then the forensic team matched the blood on his trainers. It was Ellie's blood. On May 6, 3 days after her death, Thomas Griffiths was charged with murder. 3 weeks later, on May 29, 2019, the town of Caen came together to say goodbye. St. Mary's Church was filled with people. Family. Friends. Teachers. Classmates. So many young faces, crying, holding each other, unable to believe she was gone. The church was draped in flowers. Pink and white like Ellie would have wanted. Photographs of her smiling face were everywhere. Ellie on a horse. Ellie with friends. Ellie laughing. Always laughing. Her parents, Matthew and Carol, sat in the front row. They held hands so tightly. They tried to be strong. But how can you be strong when you're burying your child? Her friends stood at the front and spoke. Their voices broke. They talked about her kindness. Her laugh. The way she made everyone feel special. They talked about plans they'd never get to make. About growing old together, a promise that could never be kept. The priest spoke about a life cut short. about senseless violence, about a community in mourning. And then they carried her out. The white coffin, so small, so wrong, carried by young shoulders that shook with sobs. Ellie Gould was laid to rest at 17. But for her family, the nightmare was just beginning. Months passed. The legal machine ground slowly. Thomas Griffiths appeared in court several times. First he said nothing. Didn't enter a plea. Made everyone wait. But on August 29, 2019, he stood before a judge and spoke 2 words. Guilty. He admitted it. He admitted to killing Ellie Gould. The sentencing hearing was on November 8. The courtroom was packed. Ellie's family sat on one side, holding each other, crying silently. Thomas sat on the other, expressionless, empty. The prosecutor laid out the evidence. The strangulation. The 13 stab wounds. Cleanup. Text. The cover-up. Every horrific detail. Thomas had written a letter to the court. His voice was read aloud, hollow words that meant nothing. "I'm so sorry," he wrote. "I know my apologies and explanations will never be enough, but I hope in time I can show how truly sorry I am." He said his mental health was not good at the time. The judge, Mr. Justice Garnham, was not moved. He called it a frenzied knife attack. He called it the most appalling act on a vulnerable young woman in her own home where she should have been safe. He looked at Thomas and said, "The effects of your actions have not only snuffed out the life of this talented girl but loaded pain on her friends and family." Then came the sentence. Because Thomas was 17 at the time of the murder, the law wouldn't allow a whole life sentence. The judge said it wasn't premeditated because Thomas hadn't brought the knife from home. He took it from Ellie's kitchen. So the sentence was life in prison, with a minimum of 12.5 years before he could even be considered for parole. 12.5 years for a life. For Ellie. Her mother sobbed. Her father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, tears streaming down his face. 12.5 years. But Carol Gould refused to break. She could have curled up and died herself. Many mothers would. The grief is too heavy. The pain too great. But Carol got up every day and she started to fight. She wanted the law changed. She wanted killers like Thomas to face real consequences, even if they were young. She called it Ellie's Law. The campaign grew. Members of Parliament listened. The case was referred to the Attorney General's office to see if the sentence was too lenient. But the answer came back cruel and cold. Because Thomas was under 21, the law wouldn't allow a longer sentence. Carol called it a crazy system. She said, "There's a huge difference between a 10-year-old and an 18-year-old. The laws need to be changed." And slowly, change began to happen. In March 2021, the government introduced the Police, Crime, Sentencing and Courts Bill. It meant that future teenage killers could be treated more like adults. They could face minimum sentences of up to 27 years. It didn't apply to Thomas. It couldn't bring Ellie back. But it meant that another family might not have to suffer the same way. Carol described it as a huge cloud that's been lifted from above our heads. But the cloud never really lifts. Not when you've buried your child. In November 2021, an independent review was published. It revealed something important about what happened between Ellie and Thomas before the murder. The report found that Thomas had tried to disrupt Ellie's studies. He wanted her to fail her exams. He wanted her to need him. It's called educational sabotage. A form of control, a way to keep someone dependent on you. Ellie was trying to build a future. Thomas was trying to tear it down. The report recommended that more should be done to help victims of domestic abuse and coercion. 'Cause sometimes the signs are there. Sometimes the red flags are waving. If only someone had seen them sooner. If only. In November 2022, Carol Gould did something extraordinary. She co-founded a group called Killed Women, a support group for families who have lost women to male violence. She started it with another mother, Julie Devi, whose daughter was also murdered by an ex-boyfriend. 2 mothers. 2 broken hearts. 2 girls who should still be alive. Together, they began campaigning to strengthen domestic homicide laws. They held hands with other grieving families. They cried together. They fought together. They refused to let their daughters be forgotten. Their work touched the highest levels of the country. In the 2025 New Year honors, Carol Gould and Julie Devi were both appointed OBE, Order of the British Empire, for their work with killed women, one of the highest honors in the United Kingdom. Carol called it bittersweet. She would give it back in a second. She would trade every medal, every honor, every word of praise, for one more day with Ellie, one more hug, one more smile. But she accepted it. For Ellie. Keep fighting. To keep making sure that what happened to her daughter doesn't happen to someone else's. Let's remember who Ellie was. Not just a victim. Not just a name in a news article. Not just a case study for a law change. Ellie was a girl who loved horses. Who woke up early on weekends to ride. Her face glowing with joy. Ellie was a girl who loved running, feeling the wind in her hair, her feet pounding the earth, free and alive. Ellie was a girl who wanted to study psychology to understand people, to help them. Ellie was a girl who wanted to join the mounted police, to serve her community, to protect others. Ellie was a daughter, friend, classmate, a smile that lit up rooms. She was 17 years old. Thomas Griffiths sits in prison today. He'll be eligible for parole in 2031. He'll still be relatively young. He'll have a chance to build a life. Ellie never will. She never got to graduate. Never got to go to university. Never got to join the police. Never got to fall in love again, for real this time, with someone who deserved her. Never got to get married. Never got to have children. Never got to grow old. All of that was stolen from her. In her own kitchen. By someone she trusted. But here's what Thomas Griffiths cannot take. He cannot take her name. He cannot take her memory. He cannot take her mother's fight. He cannot take the law that now bears her name, protecting others. He cannot take the lives she saved through killed women. He cannot take the OBE that sits on her mother's shelf, earned in her daughter's memory. He cannot take the love. Oh, the love. Still here. In every tear that falls. In every story told. In every girl who learns self-defense because of Ellie. In every law that changes because of Ellie. In every mother who holds her daughter tighter because of Ellie. Ellie Gould died on May 3, 2019. She is not gone. She is in the wind on a summer morning. She is in the thunder of hooves on grass. She is in every girl who refuses to be controlled. She is in every mother who fights back. She is here, right now, in this story. And as long as we tell it, she always will be. Rest now, Ellie, you are not forgotten. You never will be. If you or someone you know is experiencing relationship control, coercive behavior, or domestic abuse, please reach out for help. There are people who care. There are people who will listen. You are not alone. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be free.